Welcome to year 3 of Ha Ha Ha. You thought it was going to be different, didn't you? Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Who needs Marc Marquez anyway? Hi guys, welcome to episode 503 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison. Glad you could join us as ever. And this time on our double bill of recordings, we're going to talk about MotoGP season opener. 2024 is arrived, it's here. It now contains drones and team photos and a more colourful intro. And us, me and Cameron Buckley, again, back for another edition of Motorsport 101 to review MotoGP's Qatar Grand Prix. And Cam, what was the vibes going into that opening round?
You know, I'm feeling real good about my life right now.
Why is that?
I'm free. I'm free! The sun is shining. The Parma violet is flowing.
Oh, yes. The aquamarine is singing to us right now.
And hey, Honda might not be the worst Japanese bike, because oh my god.
Oh god, yeah, we'll get into that a little bit later on as well, but holy hell. We got a lot to talk about here in a sense, even though, hey, maybe the main event itself wasn't all that great, but yeah, my gosh, it hits different now we've actually seen it with our own eyes, the blue 93 of Marc Marquez on a Ducati. But hey, Francesco Bagnaia basically went full Marvin Harrison and said, hey, they ask about me. You all forgot about me, didn't you? And as he would go on to comfortably win the opening round of the season in Qatar. Yeah, a reminder, like, if this was a Flacco 811 wheel, it would be just a zoomed-in picture of Bagnaia's face. He's still him.
No, it would be a zoomed-in picture of a Repsol Valentino.
Yes. Or just the Luka Doncic picture of him, just a zoomed-out picture of a goat. Exactly, because that's Bagnaia. Still stupidly fast right now and comfortably winning ahead of his old nemesis, Jorge Martin. So we'll be talking a little bit about that shortly. We'll also be talking about Marc Marquez and arguably the real biggest surprise of the weekend, Pedro Acosta. And what a weekend he had. My God. It's the definition of Michael Scott in The Office going, oh my God, it's happening. Everybody stay calm. What do you mean? Stay fucking calm. Yeah, it turns out that Pedro Acosta is every bit as advertised. And that's a scary thought for us all. We'll also talk a little bit about the Pramac pickle, the Yamaha struggles on what Johan Mir hilariously called the Japanese Cup. In a battle he had with Fabio Quartararo during the race.
The contrast of 10 years ago.
Oh, Lord of mercy. I was watching like the race itself on our Discord server, and I literally joked, hey, if you want to set the time machine back 10 years, just look at the battle for 12th place right now between Johan Mir and Fabio Quartararo. Like, look at all this Honda and Yamaha fighting back here. You'd think it was 2013 again. Nope.
Yeah, just add a place on the digit holder.
Yes, yeah, just add a place there and put Alvaro Bautista in a white and green customer Honda and stick him in the back of that truck. And there you go. The picture's complete, basically. So, yeah, all about that and Pramac's issues as well going forward as well, because they might be in a bit of a pickle. We'll talk all about all the weekend, actually, because it was actually a great weekend of action outside of the main event, which is kind of weird in that sense. But yeah, we'll get into all that over the next 50 minutes or so. But especially you can find us real quick. We're on Twitter at Elon Musk's failed business investment, at Dre Harrison 101 and at CBuckley917. We'll also on Instagram, Motorsport 101 Pod, our website, motorsport101.com, where you can check out race reviews of all last weekend's action, Formula One, MotoGP, and IndyCar. And if you really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/Motorsport101. You can back us financially on there at the $5 level to get early access to all of our episodes. And you can upgrade, if you like, to the $10 version. We can listen to them live as they're being reported. And you get supporters access on our Discord server as well. So, without further ado, let's get into MotoGP season opener, the Qatar Grand Prix. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Francesco Bagnaia took the lead of Qatar despite Jorge Martin's sensational record-breaking pole lap at 150.7, the fastest ever lap of the circuit, official or otherwise. And, well, Bagnaia never really looked back, comfortably winning by just over a second from KTM's Brad Binder, the Lord himself. He passed some fucking bikes, and we love to see it, and Jorge Martin in third. Now, is it just me, Cam, or does it... Like, it's weird we're talking about this way about a double MotoGP world champion, the reigning double MotoGP world champion, but has Bagnaia's form been slept on going into this season opener?
It's a little weird. It was a very Bagnaia weekend now, wasn't it? Because a lot of struggle throughout practice, struggled throughout qualifying, didn't quite get the lap he wanted. Was just okay on Saturday, and then he beat the field into complete pace on Sunday. Saturday.
Yeah.
Saturday?
Sunday.
Sunday.
But Dunda doesn't care about Ramadan. Nah.
That has ramifications. Yeah, completely blew the field away. But, I mean, as far as a start to a title defense, you could do worse than that.
It's a very similar pattern to last year. And if anything, I thought it was quite funny because I know multiple Ducatis complained. I know Martin did more than anybody else, but I know Bagnaia did too, about the concerns about the chatter on the rear of the Dukes, especially when higher levels of tyre wear came into play. And, you know, they were concerned that that rear chatter would disrupt their pace. This said on a weekend when Ducati finished 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah, they're really struggling. Can I just say, Brad Binder, the Lord's work. He only man to beat Martin and Bagnaia in a weekend. Shame it wasn't in the same day.
No, it's always this weird pattern how this shit turns out. We got it the wrong way around again. It was Jorge Martin picked up where he did last year, won the sprint fairly comfortably, but then Bagnaia,
Sprint merchant is back.
The sprint king of law. Remember, Martin won 9 sprints last year, and he's now won his 10th sprint. He's got double-digit sprint wins in like 21. He's won almost half the sprint races we've ever seen in MotoGP. That's hilarious to me. And we kind of predicted that really with the way this format's changed. But Bagnaia is doing what he's always done. He sacrifices large chunks of his weekend to get the setup right. He will sacrifice the sprint if he has to. Because if you remember watching that sprint, he was going fine in third place, but then his tyres dropped off quite heavily at the end of that sprint. Like the last lap and a half, he was really spinning the rear up. And Aleix Espargaro straight up passed him to get onto the podium in the sprint race. And
remember Aleix Espargaro and, the thought that he was going to be a win threat? That lasted all of a foot.
Claims it might have been a dud tyre. Wouldn't be the first.
Another one.
Yeah, he said the rear tyre was like ice and he couldn't explain why he was going so slow. Very weird. Because he was very good in the back end of the sprint, was very fast at the end of the sprint, but then in the Grand Prix was nowhere to be seen.
This Aprilia, if nothing else, is almighty through downforce corners, which I'm saying about a motorcycle with a diffuser. Remember
Exhaust
that this
blown.
bike has an exhaust-blown diffuser? Anyway, before I have a mental breakdown. But yeah, Bagnaia, he used the rest of the weekend to experiment around a lot and experiment and see what works. And so far it's been working for him. In this case, it didn't even get that far. He more or less took the lead within 2 laps and was never seen again. There were flashes of pace from others, but I imagine under the gun of the revised but still quite harsh tire rules, clean air is more valuable than ever.
For those who don't know this, they had to... this was, again, the FIM being unserious here. We had a last-minute governance change on tyre pressures. We didn't mention this in our season preview because they literally finalized this the Thursday of the race weekend, that essentially... And they hit it at the bottom of the paperwork as well, which was really clever of them. But what happened was they raised the minimum tyre pressure limit from 1.8 bar to 1.88. 0.8 bar. So a bit more pressure allowed, but
still wouldn't pass MOT.
Still wouldn't pass an MOT, but also riders now have to be compliant for 60% of the race distance rather than the previous rule of 50. But also the big one, disqualifications were taken back off the table again. So you will no longer be DQ'd if you break the tyre pressure limit. You will now be given a flat 8-second penalty in the sprint and a 16-second time penalty in the Grand Prix, which will pretty much take you out of the points.
I was going to say that's still practically a result death sentence.
Yeah, more or less. That's a chasm in this sport.
So
just to clarify.
I think they're more or less doing that for optics because it doesn't look as bad. It doesn't look as bad if you see multiple bikes, penalized rather than disqualified. But, I mean, yeah. Despite the chatter issues that supposedly the GP24s are suffering from, at least at this track, they're quick enough to compensate for it.
Yeah.
And the GP23s, still as money as ever.
So we'll talk a little bit about that now as it goes, because, obviously, the big headline mover was going to be just how is Marc Marquez going to cope in his first weekend on a Ducati. The answer, pretty well. Qualified sixth. He could have had pole position. He had 3 red splits on his final fly-in lap, lost 0.2 in the final corner, ended up down in 6th. That's how close qualifying was. No one really put an optimal lap together because Martin was on a very fast final lap and he lost it all as well.
This track does weird things to tires these last couple of years.
It really does. It's very bizarre.
It just seems like you might get a dud tire. You might get a tire that's good for 80% of the lap. And that last 20%, depending on where you allocate your speed in the lap, you're just hanging on.
Yeah,
because again, no one nailed. And Martin's lap turned the record into dust. Still not really optimal.
No, there was at least another 0.2 on the table, I reckon. Maybe a little bit more than that, but it was still a new lap record by half a second.
What does that say about the state of these bikes?
I mean, did you see the stat they put out this morning that this year's race time was 14 seconds faster than last year's?
Under stable regulations with the same tires. And I mean, these bikes don't develop like F1 cars, but it sure feels like they are.
Well, do the math, Cam. That's 0.6 on last year. A lap, roughly. That's at least, it's a 22-lap race. It's about 0.6, 0.7 of a second per lap on last year. And these are already the fastest MotoGP bikes we've ever seen. It's ridiculous what we're talking about here. But no, Marc Marquez was out there, 6th in qualifying, 5th in the sprint race, made a small mistake towards the end of the sprint, which opened up the door for him to fall down to 5th, but then 4th in the Grand Prix. Had a late fight with Jorge Martin to potentially try and get on the podium, couldn't quite get there. But it was also joined briefly in that fight with Pedro Acosta, who at one point we were thinking, could Pedro Acosta get on the podium on debut? Didn't quite work out, though. He did overcook his tyres.
He was cooking a little too fast early on because he would put on a show first half of the race. He was spectacular. Scything up the inside of riders, making shapes, making saves on the bike. That had the effect of completely rooting his tires, and he fell back down probably to where he belonged on overall pace, about 9th. Still very respectable.
Absolutely. He got a standing ovation from Tech 3 when he pulled back into the garage. Hervé Poncharal was rubbing his hands with glee. Like, I've got this man for at least a year. Now we're cooking. This is no Augusto Fernandez, let me tell you. Because boy, this boy's nice. And Pedro himself was a little bit starstruck by the whole occasion. If you listen to his debrief after the race, which by the way I loved because this guy's fucking hilarious, said, quote, "The fight with Marc lasted as long as it had to. It's like losing your virginity. Everything is very beautiful and ends up being a disaster."
New favorite rider. GOAT.
I love this kid. He's 19, by the way, so that probably wasn't that long ago.
Can I just say, in a weekend where Jack Miller made a complete ass of himself in the race,
again,
we might have that factory seat sooner than he might think.
Yeah, let's talk about Marquez a little bit first. I mean,
if this is the worst he runs on a Ducati, I feel real good about my life right now.
Yeah, I mean, there were shit-eating grins when he came home from the sprint in fifth, because Marquez doesn't like Qatar. It's always been a bogey track for him.
This has always been the one time he won here, was the year 2014.
14, was the one time he won there. But yeah, he doesn't like this track at all, and he was a comfortable fifth, running leader's pace pretty much the whole way through. Grand Prix, P4, doesn't really put a foot wrong, was in range of a podium pretty much the whole way through. That's if he's doing that round here on a track he doesn't like, first time on a brand new bike in anger, he's going to be absolutely fine.
Better than fine. And you can see this is a mark that he is still very much learning this bike, because there was none of the typical Marc Marquez attempting to fold the bike in half, hanging off the bike antics. He was visibly within himself, but still able to get decent lap time out of the bike. So if this is as bad as he runs it, this is him still acclimating to the bike and unlearning 11 years of Honda. I feel real good about this season.
I think
Give me Coda. Give me that shit.
I think we might have to pencil Coda and the Saxon ring back in as Marquez banker rounds again.
I think we might be able to pencil in a few. It's
maybe Aragon too. Loves the anti-clockwise tracks.
I really want to see what he's like. And again, a very interesting thing as well. He looks like he's at no point this weekend did he look like he was going to crash the bike, which is nice. Great change in the last couple of years.
Actually reassuring that he wasn't going to stack it.
I'm itching for the next round. I'm like, come on. What has he got in store?
Well, I mean, we've got Portimao next in a week and a half's time. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because I would argue that's going to be a much better representation of where the state of the field is at, because Qatar is a bit of an outlier. The night race, the freaky temperatures, the amount of wind in play. Portimao will give us a much better sign of where these bikes and riders are at relative to each other, because Qatar tends to be an equalizing kind of round. I'd argue Portimao last year gave us a better sense of the early season where the field was at, because it was Bagnaia that dominated that race. But I say dominated. Maverick Vinales tried everything to beat him in Portimao last year and couldn't quite do it.
I'd say last year wasn't all that representative overall, because we saw the constant is Ducati. If anything, Qatar now is even more of a Ducati track because of the nature of how that bike makes its lap time, which showed in the finishing positions, because, oh my God, it was a near complete red wash at the front. Again, Brad Binder. If Flacco 811 video, 5x zoom in on Brad Binder's face.
Oh yeah, still ridiculously fast when he needs to be. He does shit that is unfathomable on a KTM. I mean, don't get me wrong, his tires were gone final lap. My man was making chips. It was like him with Martin directly behind him. It was like I was watching Buriram last year all over again. It was hilarious. It was like, my man is sideways coming into these corners.
He was endoing on every power delivery.
I don't know how he does it. I just don't know. He's a dirt tracker in all but name. It's fucking hilarious. But yeah, we've got to talk about Pedro Acosta a little bit as well. Pedro Acosta is him. Say what
when
you will about him. When
he learns how to ride one of these things, sweet Jesus.
This boy nice. He's going to be like, I reckon he's going to be on a factory KTM next year, and he's going to give Brad Binder a headache. I think this kid is special. I like this. we've seen him from his Moto3 days. We saw this man win a Moto3 race from pit lane with a double long lap penalty. And I knew right there and then that this kid was something special. And shocker, we're actually seeing it come to pass in real time. He's still a teenager. He's 19 years of age. And he's this good already. This is terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, instantaneously, second best KTM. Not even close.
Nope. Because Fernandez is struggling. Augusto's really struggling with this new KTM, apparently.
Yeah. Jack Miller threw the bike up the road immediately in the race.
Again.
Welcome to Jackass. No, not that way.
No.
Sadly, we don't have our Discord soundboard over in Riverside.
I might just add in post-production. But no, like it's no longer funny with him anymore, seeing him bin it, because it's just like, Jack, what are you doing?
It is him being likable because, don't get me wrong, funny bastard.
Oh, I love Jack Miller. He's a great guy.
I love his personality, but we're starting to trek into the territory of what's the best thing about Jack Miller as a rider. Oh, he's a really nice guy. He's awesome to talk to.
Yeah,
that's really dangerous territory to be in,
right?
Because it feels like he's very now clearly on the decline after a couple really damn solid years. But he never got over the tire wear hump, and now he is lacking the upside to counter his downside.
It's brutal. Yeah, the way this is going, Acosta's going to be on a factory KTM next year, and Miller might be out of the sport entirely.
The way it's going right now, he might not even see out that year on the factory KTM. I'm going to be real with you.
The KTM will be keen to bring in somebody else the way this is going, because we all know KTM are ruthless when it comes to rider management. They will chop.
There's no sentimentality in that organization, not an ounce.
No, they will fuck you off if they have to. And Acosta is looking like everything we thought he was going to be at 16, now at 19. I'll say it. The last time we saw a 19-year-old this exciting was when Marc Marquez won his Moto2 title in 2012. Because that was the last time we saw a 19-year-old be this good in anything.
Yeah, I mean, Mark strolled in and got second on debut, won his second race. I don't know if we're seeing that out of Pedro, but Jesus, I mean, he was giving experienced people a bloody nose, and he rooted his tires to do it, but it was fun to watch.
Oh, it was hilarious.
Fun as hell.
Loved it. It's like, fuck, look at this.
But in the entire field, the person who should be honestly, who should be most worried coming out of this weekend is probably Jack.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of
Pedro. Yeah. Pedro's too good to leave in the Tech 3 seat right now.
I'm going to go off script a little bit here and mention a couple of things as well, but I didn't have time to put in our actual set list because we're actually going ahead of pace. I'm surprised at myself for doing that, but the Japanese Cup, like,
how are they so ass?
Like, Honda looks like they've genuinely gained a little bit of ground. The fact that they're running 12th, 13th, and not.
You know how awful it is that they were saying that. Like, oh yeah, they were knocking on the door of a top 10.
No, this is an improvement. Like, Honda,
where was the bar?
Subterranean, but that's besides my point. I mean, look, it is progress. Genuinely, Honda seems to have taken a step forward. They still have a long ways to go, but they don't maybe have to be totally dependent on Marc Marquez anymore. And that's a step in the right direction overall for them as a factory. Yamaha stink.
I'm going to pose this article headline from the race.
Mm-hmm.
Least competitive Yamaha ever?
Yeah.
Is that good? Is it good that Fabio Quartararo started his post-race press conference with, "It is what it is"?
The universal racing sign that shit is going down when you give it "it is what it is, man. It is what it is." That phrase was doing a lot of heavy. I mean, Fabio, like, we had a bet. for charity about whether Fabio leaves this team this season, and I was genuinely optimistic going into the season, and now I feel like I'm almost condemned to be making a charitable donation because, my God, his mood turned when he got to Qatar. He said going into the weekend, the bike's got no rear grip. And
yeah, I mean, in the sprint, I mean, and they could get some lap time out of it, but they shot their rear tires to pieces in practice and in the sprint. So then they turned the engine down for the race to preserve the rear tire, and the Yamaha has no straight line speed. You have to pick. You can either go quick in a straight line and have the bike be unrideable, or get shot to pieces by the bikes around you.
When was the last time Yamaha was this uncompetitive? 2003, maybe?
No. Still had debatably the second best bike on the grid.
Carlos Checa was still all right in 2003. I remember because I wrote about it in the
03, they were starting to get their shit together with the M1, and then Rossi and Burgess came in and perfected that work. We all know what happened in 04.
No kidding.
05. God, probably late 90s in the two-stroke era when Honda was just running roughshod over them. When like Mick Doohan was making people think the 500 class were a bunch of scrubs.
Right.
It does nothing well. I mean, even the classic Yamaha, the Apex and the turning grip, it's just not enough. And they're losing out there, and they're just hemorrhaging time everywhere else in the lap. There's nowhere that Fabio can make time. And Fabio Quartararo is a top 3 rider on this grid.
Right. He's
nothing he can do.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was going to say, like, this feels like a toxic relationship because Fabio Quartararo clearly has a certain idea as to what he thinks this bike needs. And what this bike needs is specifically not what he's telling them. And the problem with that is that if you go against your rider, you lose your rider. And we all know Fabio is a top 3 rider in the world on a good day. So if you're Yamaha, you know what it's like? It's the Titanic is sinking and you've decided to hitch a passenger and it's a boulder. It's like... It's an infinite hard. Feedback loop.
It's hard because I just don't...
You see what I mean here, though?
You would have come out of last year and thought, man, of the 2 Japanese manufacturers, you wouldn't have thought that Yamaha are the one more in disarray right now. They haven't lost their Shohei Ohtani yet.
No.
But he's speaking. And everything, like, they add power to the bike, it just kills its rear tire. They add aero and grip to the bike, it's not fast enough in a straight line. At some point, they're gonna have to clean sheet that bike. They're gonna have to do what Honda did a couple years ago, hopefully better than what Honda did. But there's no quick fix.
No.
They've got all the testing time in the world. They have all of the concessions that these regulations hand them. But if you're pouring it into a bike that just fundamentally doesn't have any more legs, they're literally and figuratively spinning their wheels. And they're probably going to lose Fabio over it, unless Fabio is just resigned to this and he doesn't go anywhere else. And I would frankly be really angry at Fabio if he did that, because it just feels like a waste of his talent. But we all know he has. We've all seen it.
Yeah, and I mean, if he does put himself out there, who takes him?
Aprilia?
Maybe.
Aprilia.
If they give up on Maverick.
I wonder.
Hang on. I've just had a sudden thought. Wouldn't poaching someone like him be exactly a Justin Marks kind of move?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it would. With factory support and equipment, no less.
They'd have to sacrifice a pretty good rider to get him. But Justin Marks.
How much is Raul Fernandez worth to you?
I mean, Mark swooped in and took Davide Brivio when we all thought he was going to Honda. Could you imagine Trackhouse signs Fabio Quartararo? They bring in a world champion.
They become title contenders. Provided if Aprilia can provide them the equipment necessary. And at the same time, you look at the Aprilia factory team. Maverick did jack shit all weekend. He does not like this new Aprilia. Doesn't like anything about it.
Nope.
And Aleix was reeling off lap times. This Aprilia is extraordinary in corners.
Yeah.
They're outgunned down the straights, but it is a missile in high-speed corners.
No kidding.
There are tracks where if they do not win, they should be ashamed of themselves. But they better hope, for their own sake, that was a dud rear tire. Because this is Aprilia. We thought they were going to take another step last year. And instead, they got left behind a little bit. And they would tell you that. This has to be the year where, okay, they have to be 1B threat to Ducati alongside KTM. And seemingly this bike has an X factor to do it. What better X factor to go and get for 2025 than Fabio Quartararo?
100%. Before I move on real quick as well, did you watch Moto2 by any chance?
I did not, sadly.
Fucking great race. Honestly. I
saw highlights. I saw highlights. I didn't see the race itself.
Yeah, I mean, Pirelli looks like they've cooked something quite nice with Moto2 this year.
Until the teams figure out the tires. It's like the Formula One where it's like, no one understands the tires. This is great racing. Someone's going to nail it and blow the field away. But until then,
I fear that's what's going to happen. But that race was so good. Again, shout out to Alonso Lopez for winning in Moto2. Barry Baltus, what a day he had! My goodness, that was a ride and a half.
Stand up, Barry Baltus, fan massive population. Sasha Wagenblast.
Sasha, our man in our Discord server, the one big Barry Baltus fan. This was Christmas for that man right here.
If he has no fans, it means I'm dead.
But shout out to Barry Baltus. He was superb in that race. He was all over Lopez like a hot rash and just couldn't quite get it done. Lopez was sublime on that final lap defensively. Didn't give Baltus an inch. Superb racing.
Dre, if we saw a defensive masterclass in Moto2 of the exact way that you judge a final lap if you're in front, we saw an equal and opposite offensive clinic in Moto3.
Oh, yeah. I'll get to that in just a second. A couple of shout-outs to mention as well. Speed Up have now won 5 in a row. Do you want to know the last...
I think they have their shit together, Dre.
Going back to last season, that's now 5 straight wins for the Boscoscuro chassis, which means Calix have lost.
They couldn't. When is the last time Calix lost 5 races in a row?
I did the math for you, so you didn't know, so I could tell you. The last time Calix lost 5 Moto2 races in a row was 2012, when Marc Marquez was winning races on a Suter. Remember them? Remember when Suter was the dominant chassis in Moto2? That was 11 years ago. Here we are now.
What the fuck?
That's the last time Calix lost 5 straight.
This is the guard officially changing in motorcycle racing.
And the thing is as well, they don't want to supply anybody else. They're too small an outfit to supply anybody else.
They don't have the means. They do not have, they're basically they are the most professional definition of some dudes in a shed.
Right, they are some dudes in a shed. And right now, if you look at their arsenal, they have Alonso Lopez, Fermin Aldeguer, Sergio Garcia, who was Moto2 Rookie of the Year last year, and Ayagura. And Aldeguer had a horrible race. He was down in 16th and out of the points. But the other 3 bikes were first, third, and fourth.
What did Mr. Emmett say about the Premac contract?
I hope it was signed in pencil.
He's got to improve that if he wants that Premac seat.
More on that in a minute, but
that is a hell of. If you were at a Moto2 death lineup, that's it.
Yeah, that's a fleet. you don't normally see riders take that degree of punt on this chassis. Normally that's like midfielders that would try and roll the dice, like RW Racing with Barry Baltus's team just switched to Calex's a couple of years ago themselves. Normally it's the other way round. Like, they've got 4 of maybe the 6 or 7 best riders in Moto 2 on their chassis right now.
Well, I think they proved last year, like this chassis has something if you can get it in the sweet spot. And clearly the teams, I mean, we saw it tail end of last year. Alligator was hotter than fish grease to finish out last year. If you can get this speed up in the sweet spot, it does have a genuine X factor up against the Calyx, which has been the chassis to have for quite literally 12 years.
Right. It's good. It's going to be
That's a hell of a fleet.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see if the teams can adapt to these tyres and whether this was an outlier or whether it was worked out. But it's a fascinating race because you could see when people are pushing harder on their tyres and when people are going too far on them. Aaron Cannett's race was a disaster for that reason. He was super fast at one point. He was doing 57.7s early doors in that race. And then he was doing 201s by the end of the race because he completely screwed his tyre over. It was a fascinating race. And I hope Moto 2 races stay like this because it was fascinating to watch in real time.
Dre, they switched to Pirellis. I didn't realize they were steel belted, and underneath the paint on Cannett's bike, it was silver and teal.
Right.
2013 Mercedes mode. It's fast for 7 corners.
But I mean, you mentioned Pramac and the Aldeguer situation. I wanted to talk about something because this is an interesting scenario. Pramac might have a bit of a pickle brewing here. Frankie Morbidelli was painfully slow this weekend. Now, to be fair, this is the first weekend he's ever ridden this Duke. He missed the entirety of pre-season due to that concussion he suffered in the combined test in Portimao back in January. Best wishes to him, of course, on the way back from that. But he was obviously understandably off the pace. There was already talk in January that Fermin Aldeguer had agreed a deal in principle to go to Pramac for 2025. And this is also another fork in the road here was that Marco Bezzecchi, we've not mentioned him at all on this pod so far.
He wasn't worth mentioning. He was completely anonymous
13th.
Whole weekend. He cannot get down with the engine braking on the GP23. It's completely against his riding style.
Yeah, he doesn't like negative torque. He likes to use that torque to help steer him into the corner. That's his riding style. That was his bread and butter. And on tracks where he could do that effectively, he was unbeatable last year. Like Le Mans and Argentina and obviously India last year, he was unstoppable. No one destroyed the field like Bez did when he was fully dialed in. This year, though, he's been completely unraveled by the GP23. And the funny thing is, let's not forget, he turned down a Pramac seat for 2024 to stay with this VR46 team. And I think he may have chosen
factory
incorrectly.
Equipment.
Yeah.
And factory support.
Because Bez thought he'd have a better shot at it at the factory seat if he stuck it out for a year.
It is just one race, but it doesn't bode well. And it doesn't bode well that every stage of testing and every stage of practice and this race, he just doesn't get on with how the GP23 slows down and enters corners. Because personality-wise, it's a very different bike to the 22. The 22 is a lot more aggressive in a lot of ways. And so for some riders that works, for some riders it doesn't. He's just missing all weekend. Last year, we tried to bring up hashtag why not Bez. And he was just
anonymous,
very, very quiet. And at the same time, when DJ Antonio didn't light the world on fire, but had quietly a very solid weekend alongside him.
That's been the story all testing as well. Fabio Di Giannantonio looked very, very good in testing. Like, he looked like someone who could be challenging for like top fives on a regular basis. Not quite there this weekend. Did crash in the sprint as well, but quietly very solid pretty much all weekend long. Is Pramac in a bit of a pickle here, Cam?
Frankie Morbidelli's fucked.
It feels like he might be completely cooked, which is just so sad if that's the case.
God damn it, dude. Like, a huge case of what could have been, but it feels like after testing, before testing, when we found out that he was injured, it's like you couldn't put him further in the deep end if you tried, and that's exactly what's transpired here. And now Pramac has one of the most coveted seats, the most coveted bike on the grid. And basically a who's who of riders trying to get onto that seat for next year. I don't know.
Martin might still leave if he doesn't get the factory seat next year. Bastianini was fine first race. Bez is angling for that seat, hence why he signed an extension to put himself off sequence on purpose. It's a messy one, man. That is not an ideal scenario for Pramac because you could potentially lose both riders. It could be a debt clearing operation at the end of the year if Martin's not happy.
They won the championship last year, Dre.
They are the best team in MotoGP on paper. But again, it's going to be a one-man wrecking crew this year if Morbidelli's form's anything to go by because he was nowhere. It's going to take him weeks to get used to this bike at best. And then even if he does, what's the end product going to be on Morbidelli? What is his peak going to be if this is what he's at right now?
I mean, for raw speed, you're probably not beating Martin in the same team unless your last name is Marquez, Bagnaia, or Quartararo.
100%.
And yeah, people are going to take pay cuts for that bike. People are going to take unfavorable deals on themselves to get that bike.
Is this the best bike in the sport?
It's
Gino
the
Bosso
most
is a great team boss.
And it's the easiest. Look, Bagnaia is locked down. Bastianini was fine. He had a perfectly fine, quiet weekend. If he does that all year, he'll keep that seat.
Absolutely.
And Martin would be out of his mind to bail on Pramac to go to not Ducati. Although we said the same thing about Max over in Formula One, so who the fuck knows?
Beatings continue, morale, etc.
There is no morale.
Before we go, as well, Moto3, David Alonso. Oh my goodness me. Oh my goodness.
One of the great final laps you will ever see in any form of motorsport. 6th to 1st.
It's Ayrton Senna at Donington all over again without the pouring rain. If you haven't seen this, TNT put up the final lap of that Moto3 race in full for free on Twitter if you want to go and find it. But also, MotoGP's YouTube channel put the onboard of that final lap from David Alonso's perspective. It is riding perfection. It is racecraft at the absolute highest level. He carves through that upper pack, corner by corner, picks them all apart, and just inevitably he picks Danny Holgado's pocket at the final corner. You don't pass at the final corner in Qatar, but it was an inch perfect dive bomb to the final corner, nailed the apex, nailed the exit, won the race. It's masterful riding. In Moto3, that is riding of the highest quality. Like, it's one of the best final laps I've ever seen from a Moto3 rider. That was wonderful. Oh, so good, Cam. So good.
You don't pass at the final corner here. He did.
No. You don't
Couldn't
pass.
have judged it better. And just on the perfect line of aggression. Not overdoing it. Just cleanly carved up 5 riders.
Well, we knew David Alonso very nearly won a Rookie of the Year award on Motorsport 101's awards last year because he was so goddamn good last year. Won 4 races in Moto3 last year, doing exactly this sort of thing. He walks into Moto3 this year almost certainly as title favourite.
If he rides like that, he fucking will be.
And if he rides like that, then pencil him in for a Moto2 seat immediately, because this dude is special. And I'm saying this about another... okay, he's Colombian technically, but he was born and raised in Spain by all accounts. He's Spanish in all but name, and even the name is familiar. But I mean, yeah, it's like Colombia's about to get a weapon up front, because David Alonso is, I'm almost certain, going to be a Moto2 rider next year, and probably with a top-end seat to boot, because that dude is him. I'll be shocked if he doesn't win the world title this year in Moto3. He is sensational. MotoGP is back in next weekend in Portimao over in Portugal, the first of 5 races in that corner of the Iberian Peninsula this year. We've got a lot of them coming up over the year or so. We'll see how the field shakes out then. We'll also be back with another episode for IndyCar in St. Petersburg to complete our hat trick of beatings on the weekend, because Joseph Newgarden, remember him? Remember how the fact he hadn't won a road or street course race since 2022? He's back. Everyone needs to be on notice. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. He's been Cam Buckley. We'll see you next time on Motorsport 101. Sayonara.